Hi, garden friends. Welcome back to the Garden Girls podcast. I'm Meg,
And I'm Dagny.
and our friendship started in a group chat talking all things gardening. So, we are letting you guys in on the group chat. And today we are going to be helping you guys tackle your real life garden struggles. We had some listeners submitted gardening issues that we're going to read to you guys, and we're going to offer you our advice. So, this should be a fun episode. I love doing stuff like this.
I'm excited because a lot of these are things that I have experienced myself,
Yeah.
or I don't know. It's cool to hear about other people's problems and not have to think about my own, honestly.
Yeah. Also, it's just a good reminder that we're all going through it. Like, nobody has a perfect
Yeah.
garden. Everyone is going through something, some kind of struggle in their garden. And I think that's always a good reminder to hear. So, yeah, Dagny, give us our first one.
So the first one is I did not know you couldn't plant different types of melons too close together. Mine cross-pollinated and my honeydew was orange like my cantaloupe. How close together is too close? And I know you've got some science for us on this one already.
So, okay, this is a total myth. I don't know what's happening, honestly, with your melon. I think that it could be maybe environmental factors. It could be heat stress, water stress. Like there's a slew of things that it could be that maybe
Or
made it come out.
overripe?
Yeah, it could be overripened, but it is not cross pollination because that is not how that happens. So cross pollination, you only have to worry about that affecting your fruit when it's the next generation. So cross pollination is happening because bees are going from one plant to the next and they are, cross pollinating. They're bringing pollen from one plant to the next plant. And the way that affects the plants is when that plant goes to seed, then those seeds are going to be some sort of hybrid, or they can be. It's not always a guaranteed thing, but they can be some sort of hybrid seed. And so your next generation could be some kind of cross between whatever melons, different varieties of melons that you have going on in your garden. I've seen this in my volunteer plants. I've seen this with my squash in my garden. I've seen this with my tomatoes. You see this with flowers a lot. You can get different colored flowers because they cross pollinate. But it is a total myth about it happening right there in the moment. It's not going to affect that year's fruit. It's just
Right,
not.
it's the next generation of seeds would be affected. And
Yeah.
I know you've talked about this affecting your squash and the potential for toxic squash syndrome. It really is
Yeah.
more of an issue if you're seed saving. So if these
Yes.
were seeds that you planted last year, it's possible that those seeds are now a different variety and that are no longer cantaloupe, but it's not because of the plant that you planted this year. I do think, just to answer the general question of how far apart, if you really do want to keep things true to type, I think it's like hundreds of feet. Like it's
Yeah.
not really doable
Right.
in a garden space. Generally, it's more in commercial grower environments. So it is a risk you take with certain seed saving things because I mean, think about how far a bee can travel, literally miles. So
Hmm.
there's just no way to guarantee. And even if you had that space in your own garden, God forbid your neighbor is growing another variety, then the bee
Hmm.
could be traveling from there. So you just really have no control over that.
Exactly. That's one of the things you got to think about when you are saving your own seeds. They're probably going to be cross-pollinated unless you were to put, some people use those like garbanzo bags or whatever they're called.
Oh,
The
the organza.
organza, yeah,
Yeah.
garbanzo. That's a
Yeah.
bean. That's not a bag.
I kind of see how your brain got there though. Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds similar in a
Okay,
way.
thank you. Thank you. Um those organza bags, you can put them over the flower and then you can hand pollinate yourself with the same variety to make sure that you're getting a true seed. You can do that. And that's something that I've done with my squash if I'm saving seeds and I want to make sure that I'm getting the same variety. But yeah, it's a misconception, but it's a really popular misconception that planting two things close together can affect that season's fruit. With peppers, there's a lot of people that believe you can't plant your sweet and spicy peppers next to each other, which again is like a total myth because they think that that's going to make your sweet pepper spicy. It's just not true. But if you
Yeah.
save seeds from your sweet peppers, then the next generation could be a spicier pepper. I planted my sweet and spicy peppers together for years and it's never,
Yeah, I do
ever,
the
ever
same thing.
affected it. So, yeah, with your melon, it's probably an environmental factor, to be honest. It could be that whatever seed packet you used, maybe the seed company mixed up varieties as well. Like maybe you had a different variety than you thought you planted
True.
or something. That's probably the more likely culprit there. So Ethan says, every year my zucchini plants start off strong, but then they get powdery mildew all over them. It spreads so fast and eventually kills the plants, so I barely get any harvest. I live in a humid climate. Is there anything I can do to prevent or treat this?
Humid climate, I would say accept the reality of the situation
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Even
Yeah.
in a climate that's not humid, it's gonna happen.
Living in a humid climate myself, powdery mildew is inevitable. If it's killing your plants before you can even get any fruit, that is a problem. And I would say maybe try to increase your airflow as much as you can. Maybe you're planting your plants too close together. Maybe you aren't pruning like you should be. Pruning off the lower leaves as your zucchini are growing is really important, and that can increase airflow around the base of the plant. The second that I see even a tiny spot of powdery mildew on a leaf, I usually go ahead and chop it. I usually don't leave it, so I try my best to stave it off as much as I can by pruning.
I think that people don't really think about pruning squash and zucchini in general. Like it's not something I really see discussed that often, or it's kind of considered like a fringe thing, like when you're training them to grow vertically or something like that. But it definitely is necessary, I would say, with almost every squash, especially summer and zucchini.
Mhm.
It will make a huge, huge difference. Like I cut off every leaf that's below like the first flower and I will just continue to chop them off. It's just really important that you cut them as close to the stem as you can. So you kind of eliminate that hollow opening because that can collect water and encourage rot. But they don't mind at all. Like I prune them very aggressively and I've never noticed any negative effects from it. All you're doing is giving it a better chance of drying out, which is really should be your main goal. And I mean, they didn't say if they're watering at all on top of that, but obviously just making sure you're watering the base of the plant
Yeah.
can be a big help too.
I was gonna say growing them vertically as well is a good option. I've done that in the
Yes.
past and it's really nice. Like it's nice. You just tie it up. I use either a stake or you can even use a tomato cage
Hmm.
for them and just as it's growing, just train it to go upwards and then prune off those lower leaves as it's growing up. That really will increase the airflow. But at the end of the season, because summer squash like zucchini, they're kind of short-lived anyway, at least here in this environment. Either the powdery mildew gets them or the squash vine borer or squash bugs. So here, at least in zone AA, we're lucky enough we can get multiple rounds of them. So I would say like at the end of the season when mine are just riddled with powdery mildew, I just rip them out and I start over. And
Yeah.
so there's nothing wrong with that either. Rip them out, start over, and get like another round of them.
There's also some F1 hybrid varieties that are bred to be resistant
Yep.
to powdery mildew. So that's another thing you could be looking for.
Yeah, I usually grow the heirloom variety, and I would say an heirloom is going to be more susceptible to powdery mildew, like the Black Beauty. Those things get powdery mildew
Mm.
like no other. So Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is a good site where they have a lot of these hybrids and resistant varieties. Also, High Mowing has a lot of different hybrids. I think Burpee has some. There's a bunch of options there. Hit us with the next one.
Let's see. Oh, this one could be kind of tricky. I feel like there's a lot of things that could go wrong here. My tomato plants look healthy, but they aren't setting many fruits. I get lots of flowers, but then they just seem to shrivel up and fall off. I've tried different varieties and I water regularly. What could be preventing my tomatoes from producing? I mean, immediately my mind goes to heat,
Yeah.
stress, right?
Mine are
But
doing that right now as we speak, actually, because we are
yeah,
having consistent 100-degree temps. And tomatoes, they love sun, but they don't love that much sun. Like they're
I know
pretty
it's kind of
delicate.
misleading. Like they are a heat-loving crop, but they're also kind of finicky about the amount of heat and the level of heat that they're getting. And it stinks because you can be doing everything right, but these environmental factors that you have zero control over will just impact everything. I mean, you've kind of solved for that a little bit by planting more in partial shade,
Hmm.
but you have to know in advance to do that, and you have to have a partial shade spot. So
Yeah.
that can be really tricky. It's interesting they're saying I've tried different varieties. So I wonder if this is something that's been happening over multiple seasons for them. Cuz yeah, I mean there are other reasons if it's something to do with like nutrients maybe that could be playing a factor too.
I think like too much nitrogen and not enough
Yeah.
potassium can cause that because you need potassium to set the fruit. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Nitrogen is good for when the plant's just starting out and you want that leafy green growth, but then once it starts setting fruit, you want to increase that potassium and phosphorus.
That's definitely a big factor with tomatoes specifically. I feel like I generally use all-purpose fertilizer in my garden, but tomatoes are one of the few crops where I feel like it does really benefit from something that's specifically for tomatoes.
Yeah. It also could be a pollination issue if you're a balcony gardener or a city gardener or you don't have any flowers in your garden, you're not seeing a lot of bee activity. Typically, if a flower doesn't get pollinated, it does just shrivel up and fall off and those fruits are not going to come. I always plant marigolds with my
Me too.
tomatoes because not only do they attract pollinators, but they prevent pests as well, like the root knot nematode. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I would say I think it's probably the heat because that's exactly what's happening
Yeah.
to me right now. I think, and my tomatoes that I have in partial sun right now, they're doing fine. The ones I have in full sun, they're just shriveling up and falling off. But I expect for them to pick back up in the fall. So
Yeah.
it could just be that they're taking a little break. We all need a little break from this heat, and hopefully they'll pick back up in the fall.
So real.
So real. Olivia says, I've been trying to grow sunflowers for a few years now, but they never seem to even sprout. If they do sprout, something immediately eats them. How do you protect your baby sunflowers from chipmunks slash squirrels?
Oh, sunflower queen. This one's all you.
See, I don't have a huge chipmunk or squirrel problem in my garden just because I do live in the city and like my garden is fully fenced in. I do have some squirrels, but they actually like help me plant the sunflowers. They usually don't dig them up for me, but there's some things that you could do. So I think starting your seeds indoors for the sunflowers and then maybe transplanting them out when they're large enough that a squirrel or a chipmunk wouldn't really bother them. That could be one thing. Or you can also put a physical barrier there, like a cloche, a wire cloche.
Yeah.
Or like I get those wire trash baskets from
Oh, yeah.
the dollar store. They're literally like $1.50 or something per bin, and you can just put them over your seedlings, and that'll just create a physical barrier. And then once they're big enough, like the squirrels and chipmunks aren't going to rip them out. I would say that's probably the easiest thing.
Yeah, I've even just thrown some row cover on top of them.
Yeah.
It's really like just the first, once they're like 4 inches tall, for whatever reason, the squirrels are no longer interested. I think like so much of the seed part has been used up by the seedling that it's not really considered food to them anymore. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue. I have had zero success growing sunflowers in ground if I do not cover them in some way and protect them with a physical barrier. I mean, I think there's probably like there's things you can spray or like pellets or something that might help repel them, right?
There's this, they make this like organic squirrel repellent. I don't really
Yeah.
remember what it's called, but also some people swear by blood meal. I don't know how
Oh,
accurate this is. I've never tried it. It's just some people swear by that, like sprinkling blood meal around it, and that'll deter them. I
hmm.
would think that that would attract something like a rodent, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
It's
anything
maybe
about
worth
blood
trying if
meal.
you're desperate.
I don't know, something about blood meal freaks me out, so I've
I
never
know.
like explored it.
Same.
It's a little intense for me. Although, I got them past that stage and then the deer found mine. So I'm back to square one with my dwarf teddies right now. We'll
I
see
think
if
I'm
I
just
get
very,
any.
I hope you do. I hope you do because there's
Me too.
like, we got to have the dwarf teddies. They're the cutest sunflowers.
They're so cute. They're so cute.
I'm lucky, I guess. I just don't ever deal with much wildlife in my garden, and we have feral neighborhood cats that also like to hang out in my garden.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so they probably chase off any kind of rodent that is there, which, but then the feral cats are their own problem because sometimes they like to poop in my beds, which is not
Yeah.
great. Like, what
Toxoplasmosis.
in the,
Awesome.
right, like,
Thank you.
what in the toxoplasmosis? That's why I always wear gloves because I'm scared. I'm like, ooh. But
That's fair. Yeah.
yeah.
Noah says, I live in an apartment and only have a small balcony for gardening. I'm trying to grow herbs and some small vegetables in containers, but they dry out so quickly, especially in the summer heat. I end up watering constantly, and I'm worried I'm overwatering or underwatering. Any tips for container gardening in limited sunny spaces? This is an interesting one. I mean, first of all, like mulch. I would definitely add a
Hmm.
straw mulch to the top of any of your containers. Or even like leaf mold is one that I use a lot in smaller containers. It's so lightweight and you can make it yourself. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
not an apartment. Straw is probably a little bit more accessible. But
Hmm.
I would start there and then think about the type of containers you're using as well. So if you're using an unglazed clay of any type, it's going to dry out a lot faster. Plastic will not dry out as fast. Obviously, a glazed clay is probably my first choice. So something that has like a shinier finish on the outside. But I wonder, like, if they're growing in grow bags, obviously that's going to dry out faster too.
Yeah. Also, your soil, whatever soil you're using, you can add some water retaining amendments like vermiculite or cocoa coir. I think holds water a little bit better than like peat moss would.
Yeah.
Or you could just like straight up compost. Like I've had containers that
Hmm.
I don't want them to dry out super fast, so I just plant them in literally straight up compost without any amendments. It tends to do well for me anyway. I think like your goal is just to retain as much water as you can. You can also repot in bigger pots if you have the room, because the bigger the pot, the less the
Yeah.
water is gonna dry out as quickly.
And then as far as like whether you're overwatering or underwatering, the best way to kind of check this is to stick your finger in the soil. It should be damp about an inch down from the top of the soil surface, and that's when you know it's time to water again. So it's tricky with that question in general because I feel like the symptoms of over versus underwatering can be really similar. Like we get the yellowing leaves with either a lot of the time, but in a container, it's much more likely that you're underwatering.
You could also set up, if you're able to, you could set up some sort of irrigation system for your
Mm.
pots, like a drip irrigation or even the watering spikes, the little
The
terracotta watering
spikes, yeah, that'd be
spikes,
perfect.
to put in as well. And that just kind of like waters your plants over time. The terracotta uses capillary action to kind of like water the roots as they need it. And you can use as big of a bottle as you want. You can use a wine bottle. You can use like a gallon carboy if you need to, but like whatever you can fit in
Yeah.
there. That's what I use those myself for my containers that aren't set up to my drip irrigation, and I use them especially when I'm going on vacation, and they're really
Yeah.
really helpful.
Agreed.
Kay says, I've done bare root strawberries for 2 years in raised beds and only get a handful of berries. They start off looking great, but then they look very sad by midsummer. I have both June bearing and ever bearing. I keep them mulched with straw and feed them Espoma berrytone.
Okay, this is tricky. I'm a little stumped here. It's hard because we don't know where you're getting your berries and specifically like what exact varieties you're growing. Because my first initial thought is like, yeah, you're growing both June and everbearing, but maybe they're not the right ones for where you live. We don't know what climate you're in either. I don't know how much of a factor that could play.
And also, she said she's planting bare root. So with
Those
bare
take
root,
longer.
they do. So with bare root strawberries, they're trickier than buying full plants from the store because they're literally just bare roots. So you usually don't get fruit that year. You might get a couple, but it usually takes a full year for those strawberries to establish themselves and root themselves. And then you'll get more berries the next year. But she said hers are just kind of dying that same year. So I'm thinking, are you keeping them moist enough? I mean, since they're bare root, they need to be kept pretty consistently moist. It seems like maybe they're not even getting established. So I
Yeah.
think that there could be like a factor there with care or environment, maybe your soil is drying out too quickly for these. Maybe you need to amend your soil. Are you mulching? You definitely need to heavily mulch bare
She
root
did say mulch with
strawberries.
straw, but yeah, I think there's a misconception with the bare roots now that you're mentioning it. Like they do take a lot longer to
Hmm.
establish, and if you think about like a root system is what helps a plant sustain itself, obviously, and they have very little of that, and they have no foliage, so
Yeah.
they need to be babied a lot more. I'm also wondering if she's planting them too deep because that can also be an issue with bare root if you plant the crown. I wonder if they're just not getting off on the right foot because of that.
Yeah, it just seems like they're not getting, there's something going on there. They're not getting off on the right foot.
Mm-hmm.
Bare root attracts a lot of people because it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper. And you can get different varieties. There's a wider array of varieties there that you can get. But I go with plants every time. I don't like dealing with bare root myself just because it's so finicky. I
Yeah,
feel like it's so much easier if you just get some nice, good, established plants in the ground.
I agree. We've done bare root for all of our in-ground beds because we're doing such large quantities, so it is a lot more affordable. But when I replant those raised beds in the fall with the blueberries, I'm definitely going to get strawberry plants because I just want it to set off on the right foot with as little effort on my part as possible.
It's a good idea.
Jacob says, I feel like I don't get as many fruits of production as the people I see online. I'm learning every year and enjoying some harvest, but might only get 2 to 5 tomatoes per plant or 1 to 2 small melons or cabbages. I live in North Carolina, so an 8A. Oh, your neighbor.
Oh, my neighbor.
Um, yeah. I mean, soil, I feel like is the biggest factor here, and it's hard to know what kind of soil you're working. I mean, obviously it's similar to yours, but we don't know how well it's been treated over time.
We don't know if it's in ground or raised bed.
And different varieties have different production
Yeah.
levels. So that's true. Like, I honestly don't get more than like 2 melons from a melon plant. And I just think that's
I was gonna say the
unfortunately
melon
normal.
sounds pretty normal. Like
Right.
if it's a bigger melon, especially.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know what varieties this is,
Yeah. We have to
but
make some assumptions here.
yeah,
But
they a big melon like that, one or two. Especially a watermelon. If you're talking
yeah,
about watermelon, it's usually like one per plant, which is why I don't grow watermelon anymore. It's too much
same.
space for too little output. And then cabbages as well. I mean, that's one cabbage per plant. But the tomatoes, it also depends because if you're growing like these big slicers, you might only get five, six. It depends on the variety. If it's a smaller tomato, I mean, and it also depends, is it determinate? Is it indeterminate? What's the
True. Yeah.
deal? There's environmental factors here. There's the heat. Like we were saying, my tomatoes aren't even producing right now, and I am going to get more in the fall. So maybe it's a factor of like it's also too hot for you right now and it's not producing, but
Right.
maybe it'll pick back up in the fall.
But I mean, it's never
So,
a bad idea to focus on building your soil
yeah.
quality. I would add 2 to 3 inches of compost and just amend it aggressively
Yeah.
because who knows? It could be structure, could be nutrients. Where you feel like you're having issues with everything you're growing, I think it's less likely that it's the varieties, unless you got all your seeds or plants from one place and maybe that place was not high quality. But it's very unlikely that that sourcing would be the issue. I do think going back to your soil and just focusing on soil health is the best course of action, regardless of your specific situation.
Also, maybe hit it with some fertilizer. I mean, all the things that he
Yeah,
mentioned were they're heavy feeders. Tomatoes are heavy feeders.
true.
Melons are definitely heavy feeders. Cabbages are definitely heavy feeders.
Yeah,
You've got to feed your plants just like as much as you water them, you got to make sure that they got food too.
they're hungry. Yeah, you gotta feed your plants.
Yes. So, again, on the topic of soil, Sophia says, I'm new to gardening and I'm really struggling with my soil. My plants look stunted and the leaves are often yellow. I've tried adding compost, but it doesn't seem to make much difference. How can I tell what's wrong with my soil and fix it effectively?
This is funny because like I have never done a soil test, but I would be very curious.
I would say start with a soil test. There's different ones you
Yeah.
can get. There's really cheap, easy ones you can order on Amazon. I've seen them at Lowe's, Home Depot. You can go to your garden center. If you want like a really extensive soil test, I'm pretty sure you can like send them in to like the agriculture something something in your county. You can
Yep.
do that. I think that they charge you. I think I looked into this for mine one year and they charged like $30, and then you test from different places in your garden, and they kind of give
Mm-hmm.
you an overall composition. So it'd be a bit trickier with raised beds, I guess, but I would start out with some sort of soil test, whatever you want to do.
Baseline. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never done it because I'm never going to be that girl who's like obsessing over the individual levels of things. But it is tricky. And like, especially if you're going into a new garden space growing in ground, you don't know what you're working with. I have the luxury of being able to pour fresh bags of soil into my gardens because they're container gardens and know exactly that composition right off the bat. So it's different. Generally speaking, I tell people the best way to empower yourself to understand where soil is at is to really get into the sensory experience of it. Like, I don't know how you would achieve this if you don't have access to other people's gardens, but if you do, like stick your hand in the soil. What does it feel like if you can find a friend who's growing a really successful vegetable garden or whatever it is? And is it holding together when you squeeze it? Does it seem to have a lot of moisture? Is it really dark? Is it really sandy? Like all these observations can kind of tell you things over time. It will take a long time to learn what those differences mean, but it's empowering because you then can make these decisions from a place of experience versus just lab test results, for example.
Exactly. And mixing in compost any chance you can get. Like, you can never go wrong with compost. I always top my beds up in the spring. I order bulk compost and top them up in the spring, and then I'm about to top them up again in the fall. Anytime you have a crop come out, it needs to be replenished. The soil needs to be replenished with something,
Yeah.
whether it is fertilizer or compost. And also, like you were saying, Dagny, like dig through your soil, see what it looks like, but also see what kind of critters are in there. Because there's, if
Mm,
there's grubs, if there's worms that look weird, like Dagny, you've had an issue. Me and you both have seen the Asian jumping worm in our soil before.
right.
And that is a type of invasive worm that can actually degrade your soil. And it does like the opposite of an earthworm, and it actually
Hmm.
damages your soil instead of helping it. And you can get those from anywhere. And so it could be something like that maybe going on.
Yeah.
There's fungal diseases that live in the soil. I'm dealing with a bed that I have wilt in there and I can't plant my tomatoes. And I only learned that through trial and error. I noticed that my tomatoes were dying when I planted
Right.
it in there, but nothing else was. So it's all trial and error, but you just have to focus on amending, putting as much nutrition back into the soil as you possibly can.
I'm also curious what kind of compost they used because, I mean, there are ways to either over fertilize, but also if the compost wasn't like it was manure, but not aged manure or something like
Yeah.
that. Like there are certain types of compost that you really need to get aged or that shouldn't be grown in like without mixing it into something else. So that can be also a factor.
I know I was talking to someone through DMs the other day, and they asked me what I did with my chicken poop because they said that they were putting theirs directly into the garden right from the coop. And I was like, no, 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 no. You can't do that. That is hot compost. It needs to be composted for like a year or more before you can put
Right.
it into your garden. You're just going to burn your plants because it's just going to disrupt that balance. There's also pH. When you do a soil test, you can also measure the pH of the soil
Hmm.
pretty quickly. And if it's too acidic, that can affect the plants. If it's too basic, that can affect the plants. And there's amendments that they make, like lime or other things to either bring that pH up or down.
Yeah.
And that one's really easy to test. I think they even make like little meters that you can put and
Hmm.
stick in the soil just to check the pH really quick. And that's just like a quick thing that you can do.
Well, this is fun. I hope more people will
I
send
know.
us
We
challenges.
should do this like once a month or something.
I know. It's cool to like think about other people's gardens and what's going on.
We're like little advice givers.
I feel useful.
I know. Well, hopefully you guys learned something from this and feel free to DM us or email us if you guys have any issues in the garden that you want advice on for our next segment that we do about this. But we'll wrap this one up here. You can find Dagny at the Cottage Peach. I am at Meg Grows Plants, and then you can find the Garden Girls podcast anywhere that you get podcasts. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one.